Good afternoon. This is my capstone presentation on crisis communication for small local governments. The reason why I decided to do this project is because several reasons. Number one, in the 21st century, it's very difficult to be an individual or an organization that doesn't have to deal with some crisis. You have large companies such as Starbucks, Uber, Tide, Gap, who had to deal with controversy over the last year. You had celebrities, Scarlett Johansson, Kevin Hart, who had to deal with various things as well too. Now those people can hire large public relations companies, but small local governments, like the one I work for, Thornton Township, which while we're the largest township in Illinois with 183,000 residents, has the smallest department out of any of the 8 departments that are within the township. That means that a lot of local governments, basically anyone who takes care of their public relations, are either an executive assistant, it's the 4th or 5th responsibility for their jobs, and they don't necessarily have any kind of public relations or communication background. So what I wanted to do was create an extensive playbook, a playbook for anybody to know some of the rules and regulations and strategies to go with when you have a crisis that happens. Because it's very important when you have a crisis that you respond very, very quickly, because that can really determine the success of you rebounding for the crisis, or it can really tarnish your brand. Some of the things I'm going to talk about is that I created, like I said, an extensive playbook that talks about various things, whether it's good case studies, bad case studies, different ways to apologize, different things you should do after an apology. I'm going to go through some of the aspects of this playbook that I'd be able to have placed in any department in local government. So in case a crisis does occur, they'd be able to read up on it even before a crisis happens or during, so they could be able to react quickly. One of the first steps I talk about is pre-crisis. A lot of people say, well, how can you plan for a crisis if you don't know what's going to happen? Well, it's like anything else. You know, when you have to deal with the emergency broadcast system, this is only a test. That was essentially for practice so that you can be prepared for an emergency. Or doing a dry run when you're about to have a child, and you may, drive the route to see if that's the best route to take or what's the best time elements you can do so you can prepare in case something happens. Some of the things an organization can really do in the pre-crisis is, number one, they have to determine who their council is going to be, who are the people within the organization that are going to be in charge during the crisis, kind of coming up with a communication plan, because you can't at that point decide who the best people are. So that way, once the council has been determined, you can do practices on various crises and see who would respond to various things. And that way you'd be able to really take a look at exactly who should be the best roles. Picking the communication person is very essential, because your CEO may not always be the best person. Whoever's going to the face of the crisis is going to be very important, because they have to convey a lot of different emotions, a lot of different initiatives, and they have to really display the right tone to hopefully bounce you away from the crisis. So that's very important as well. Also, it's very important to be transparent. Part of my paper talked about organizations like the NBA, who were very not only fan friendly but media friendly. They gave access to fans and access to the media with their players. Were very, very transparent in the beginning. So once an organization becomes that transparent and you have a good connection with the media, then when something does occur, you may curry better favor with them because you've been transparent and you've been open in good times. And so they'll see you as being transparent, likely, in bad times as well. It's always good to have that, like I said, curry that good kind of favor before anything can happen. So those are some of the things you can do in the pre-crisis mode. Then all of a sudden, when a crisis does occur, what ends up happening? The very important thing you have to do is the first step, if you're doing something incorrect, is a very strong apology. We've all had situations where we had friends who have given us not strong apologies at all. And simply saying I'm sorry is not good enough. Not only what you say, but how you say is extremely essential. You have to use strong languages. When I say strong, you have to say, I am deeply disheartened by my actions. I should have never done that. Some of the examples of that was Starbucks, who went through a controversy when 2 black men were arrested for not ordering anything at a Starbucks, and they wanted to use the public restroom. When after that happened in Philadelphia, the CEO came and also the CFO, and they talked a little bit about the fact that this is not who we are. This shouldn't have happened. We believe that it was unintentional but still racially motivated. This is not what we want to be as an organization. We are deeply sorry for that. Those strong words let people know there's just more than I'm sorry or more than shifting the blame. The second step, to go with Starbucks as well, is corrective action. It's a larger term used to talk a little bit about what are the actions you're going to do after, because simply saying I'm sorry and giving an apology is not good enough. What are you going to do to rectify the situation to make sure that this does never happen again? Some of the things they did at corrective action is they quickly, a month into the situation, shut down all their stores for racial bias training, which was very essential as well. They were willing to lose money on one full day to make sure that they had a good conversation with all their team members. That showed that they cared more about fixing the problem than the bottom line. Secondly, they looked at their regulations and immediately took away the rule that you have to buy something to use the bathroom because they want people to feel inclusive. We've all gone to mini coffee houses and never used the restroom used the restroom and never bought anything and was never kicked out. And they saw some of their rules and strategies and they realized that wasn't the proper element to do, and they decided to change. And doing that very quickly instead of just saying we're going to look at situations, we're going to look to change in the future, and giving a ubiquitous timetable. Instead, specifically within the first month and a half, changing those kind of things showed that they were very serious. The reason why it's very important because image is described as the perception a person or a group has about an organization. And the reason why that's essentially very important is because that identity really shapes what the audience thinks about you. And it can move in a second when it comes to that. So it's very important to, when a crisis happens, to be able to really rectify it. Another element is social media. With anything becoming viral very quickly, anyone can take a video of something, and all of a sudden, a small town of 2,000 people can be a top story on Yahoo and CNN. It's very important that wherever the controversy first became viral, broke out, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, that apology and the corrective action that we talked about doing, you place something in that platform because people will be looking to come back. It still makes sense to do it in all platforms, whether it's Facebook, your website, Twitter, as well as YouTube if you have your own YouTube channel video. But it's very important to really specifically combat the exact social media aspect of where the viral video first came out, to put your apology on that platform because people will be looking to go to that platform to see what your response was. Another aspect that we talked a little bit about is another company such as Mylan. They were the company that skyrocketed the EpiPen 250% fold. All of a sudden, when the controversy happened, their CEO went on television. They talked a little bit about their situation, and they used very strong words. Not only necessarily talking about how they wanted to rectify the situation, they gave free EpiPens to different communities, but they connected with the audience, and that's what's very important. Whenever you have any crisis, it's very important to know exactly who your audience is. For Mylan, obviously, it was parents who are buying these EpiPens a lot of times for their children. So to see the official from Mylan talked a little bit about the fact that as a mother, I can understand the pain that you have to go through when your child is not doing well. She made that connection with the audience. Now, some people may see that as pandering, but it's very important to make that connection and to know your audience and make that connection on who exactly you're talking to and speak towards them. That would go a very long way in helping you through a crisis in general. But there are some times where you don't necessarily feel like you did anything wrong. And there's the denial versus an apology. Well, the thing with denial is that if you're going to say that you didn't do something at all in a situation, you have to back it up with facts, and it can't simply be an emotional plea and say, shifting the blame. Because research has already found by communication methods, whether it's Benoit's image repair, situational crisis communication, and other scholarly experts have said that when you shift the blame, then people view you as not taking responsibility. Your audience is going to feel very emotionally tied to something, especially if it affects them or affects their community. So a lot of times they just want to be heard and they just want to be listened to, and they want to be able for you to understand that what you happened to do, which maybe wasn't intentional, was still something that was harmful to them. That's why one of my favorite sayings is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because just because you meant to do something the correct way doesn't mean that you did. In the same way that just because you're angry doesn't mean you're right. And so because of that, You have to speak to your audience's emotional concern and say, well, we hear you, we understand the situation, and you can still explain your situation even if it's not a full apology. It's still understanding someone else having emotion to the whole thing. One example I like to use that was a bad example of crisis communication was Chris Brown when he had the issue with Rihanna. A small amount of backstory is that they got in a fight and he physically abused her in general. There were photos that showed her face all battered. When he went on Larry King to talk about the situation and talked about, what he first felt like when he first saw the photos, he basically said he thought the photos at first were doctored and he couldn't remember doing that, which is a negative thing because you're saying, well, you battered somebody, but you can't remember it. That doesn't make you look good. Secondly, when he had an opportunity for the judge to give him community service, and Larry King asked about that, his first sentence he said about that was, well, as a celebrity, I think I can do more talking to kids than picking up trash. That made it seem like he was above the sentence what he did in general. You could have said that you wanted to both pick up trash and talk to the community, but you're not above anybody else when it comes to a crime. He didn't use strong enough words in apologizing. His mother and his lawyer did actually a better job in defending himself than he did. And that's the one thing. When you do something wrong, you as an individual organization has to be your best spokesperson. It can't be someone else speaking to your respect. They can soften the blow, but they can't make other people feel better about an action that you did yourself. That's an example that's bad. And the last component I'm going to talk about, the emotional component. There is an emotional component in any situation. Most people, they say from emotional communication experts say when they get mad, anger can dissipate between 10 to 15 minutes, but it can also be fanned as well. How you apologize, what you do in the beginning can determine if that person is going to be upset for a short amount of time or a longer amount of time. So whenever you're going to any news conference, you have to remain calm. You can't look defensive. You can't look combative with any questions. You have to convey, a calm demeanor. You have to convey the emotion of concern for the situation, because if not for something that your organization had done, whether it was blatant or unintentional, then you wouldn't be in this situation. So you have to understand that and convey those emotions to the public and understand the audience is here with certain emotions as well too that need to be quelled. To conclude, those are some of the aspects of what I have in the playbook. Like I said, you can't necessarily solve every problem or know exactly what to do in every situation because every situation is different. But at least by creating an extensive playbook that can tell people some of the successful strategies and some of the steps that need to be done for you to be able to successfully make sure your brand is not tarnished would be at least the first step for people to know who have no communication background experience at all. Like I said, a secretary or someone who works in general assistance or works in the assessor's office or the clerk's office, they're more of an expert on that realm. They're not the person who should be talking necessarily to the media, not the person who have any kind of media training. They're not the kind of person who should be the face of a crisis or know exactly what to do. So as not only a master's student, but also having a background in journalism and a background in public relations, marketing, and advertising, social media, I believe creating this playbook that talked a little bit about all the steps and all the strategies and different components and parts that I mentioned in this presentation will be very helpful to a local organization that really needs to know a little bit on the basics when it comes to how to deal with a crisis, what to do before a crisis, and a little bit of the aftermath as well. Well, thank you very much.